Welcome, everybody, and thank you for the birthday wishes. You can pass those around. I'm gonna not have one because I got on my birthday cake yesterday. I gotta get back on the wagon.
Yeah.
That sounds like
I hear you.
Otherwise, I stretch it out for like a month, which my wife does birthday month,
Wow, that's nice to hear. I'm not the only one.
No, I'm working off my winter fed too.
Yeah, I call it my squirrel fat. So let me pray and we'll do some introductions and we'll dig in for today. So, Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for this time that we have to get together and talk about your work and how we can help others. I just pray that as we go through the material that your Spirit would just speak to us and what we can grow in and what we can learn today and how we can learn from each other. Thank you again for this time. May you just be honored by everything we do around this table now in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
So we usually start with just some introductions so we all get names again. And yeah, I didn't think of a question. We'll just do names. If you remember last time we were here, we all skated out of here on the ice.
Yes.
And we'll follow the same format. So basically, we'll debrief over the last chapter that you read and any thoughts from last session. And then Paula will lead us in a story from the Bible. We'll get into discussion about that. Then we'll look at a brief video. It's about 9 minutes today, this one. And then read the case study for our next week's reading and close it up with any comments or discussion around last thing. So that's kind of what we've been doing each. This is week 4.
Yeah.
Which time flies when you're having fun, I guess. So, yeah. So why don't we start here and just introduce yourself.
I'm Mary Manley, intake, and I missed the last couple of times because I've been traveling, so.
Oh, nice.
got back-
Don't feel sorry.
I know, got back yesterday morning, so back into it today.
Jean Sorensen, intake.
Janet Pearson, First Baptist.
I'm Donna Bleak, and I missed last week, the last time too, because I was in Arizona, so just back out, so.
Pat Bradbury intake.
I'm Bernie Harding.
Kathy Gums.
Carmen Bramstead.
Susan Carroll, intake.
John Meager, intake.
Paula Graves, I'm on the board and from Light of Christ Church.
And Paul Leaper, I'm on the board, Christian Fellowships.
Can I ask everyone to repeat their name slower? No.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and talk about, so we normally read a chapter that had to do with the material from the time before. And so your reading for this session was week 3. And so let's just, before we get into today's material, just pause and think back over that last session. If you remember the case study we read was about a gal named Lori who'd just been through the ringer, divorced, had kids, and Lois writes these stories. So Lois offered to pray with her at the end of their phone call, and she went off and said, "Where's God? How can you let this stuff happen to me?" So that was the case study, and we talked about last week, and you can see day 1. So there's the summaries of the days from the book. I think we'll just kind of go through the days, and if you have highlighted anything or something that you want to share, we'll do it that way. So day 1, the reading was really about the importance of recognizing someone's value to God. So when we're helping our neighbors in need, that we help them. That a lot of times people who are living in chronic need, it just wears on you in so many different ways. We'll talk about the wagon wheel principle today, but it wears you down in so many ways that eventually, if you live there for a long enough time, your whole demeanor about yourself, how you view yourself, they don't have very good self-value, and they don't see themselves. And so one of the biggest ways and why relational compassion, redemptive compassion is so important is because it takes time to get into people's lives to help them regain that, how God views them. And honestly, we need to keep that, always work on I need to look at people like Jesus sees them. And that's not always easy, is it? You know, especially family sometimes, right? But, you know, it's hard to do that sometimes, and how you view them. So that first day was really about, you know, recognizing that people do have value in God's eyes, and we need to look at them like that. Day 2 was, you know, how we respond then will either restore their self-worth or reinforce the negative self-image that they have. And maybe we could pause there and talk about that. So, like, how are some things that we help people, how do we help people that maybe reinforces the self-worth that they should have? Or how do we help people that reinforces the negative? So let's kick that around a little bit. So what do you think? Think about how we typically help people. Good ways to
Focus on the
Giving them
need.
something. yeah.
Okay,
Go ahead.
By just giving them something, especially something they could maybe get themselves, we devalue them then.
so that devalues them or keeps them in that, that negative self-esteem. Jean, you
I think it was similar. I should say we're focusing on the need. I liked what she said in one of these paragraphs rather than the person.
Any other thoughts on how we help people, either restores them or reinforces the negative? Anything on the positive side?
One of the questions that we asked them
Yeah.
is, you know, what's been positive in your life, or if they have a need, what are you doing to, you know, help yourself or something? So it just gives them I think a way to think about things differently and a way to verbalize that.
I think just showing that true concern about what's going on in their life. Oh, wow, how did that go for you? Just, you know, the listening that shows up with concern or care.
Okay, great. That actually leads us to the day 3 in the reading is about listening and how we listen for people.
I think I'll just pull this chair, that's fine.
Welcome. And how we listen to people. Listening is an interesting topic. We spend a lot of time talking about listening. I think a lot of times we think we listen. You can really spend a lot of time in your life developing the art of listening. And those of you who are especially working in the Connection Center during the intake, the importance of listening. I was reminded when at the beginning of the school year, and I work with families and increase the school district, that's my job. And I was reminded we had a staff meeting before the school year began, we were reminded everybody has a story. So even the children have a story, right? There's a reason why. And you don't know that unless you take a breath and step back, you know, and listen, really listen. Don't talk, listen. And I'm glad that they spent quite a few, you know, pages in day 3 just talking about
Yeah.
listening. How do we normally listen?
Distracted.
In and out, usually.
Okay, in and out, distracted.
Thinking of what you're gonna say next instead of really listening to what
Okay.
you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm terrible with names, and I think the reason for that is because as soon as you tell me your name, or when I say, hi, I'm Paul, you're just telling me your name, I'm thinking about what I'm gonna say next.
Yeah.
That's just where I get stuck. I need to get rid of that, you know, just relax and get your name. Yeah, so listening is a big part of, it's the first step of having someone, helping them reclaim their value. Because listening is a gift. You know, it takes time, right? And then they move on in day 4, they talked about affirming words. Then we go beyond just listening and then reflect and start to reflect, which is day 5 is restoring too. Reflect back to them the value that God sees them. You know, and again, that's why it's so important to begin with day 1. Us recognizing everybody has value. Everybody's story, we listen for that story, and then we reaffirm it back in their life. So that's really what that whole chapter, that whole week was about. Session 3, helping people understand their value to God. So, any comments? Let's kick some of that around if you want to just rip through it real fast. So, you might have written some notes or underlined some things. there's questions in there maybe you had written answers to that you want to bring up. So any ahas or anything you want to bring out, and put on the table?
One of the things I think that she talked about was not being in a hurry. And so, had she been in a hurry and just gone through the information, the Lori wouldn't have opened up as much as she did. So I think that was part of the whole listening, was not rushing. So truly listening and not rushing.
Yeah, not rushing. Good. Anything else?
I think too, when you ask them a question, that brings value to them.
Or like a non-judgmental question, a question to hear more of the story.
Hear more of the story,
Yeah.
or how would you like to change that, or, it's all about them.
Right.
So to get them to say more of their story.
Tell me more about that.
Or I do a paraphrasing a lot, like, wait, I'm not sure I caught that right. Can you clarify that for me? And sometimes I'll say, I didn't catch that at all the first time, Whoa, okay, just to repeat it sometimes.
Anything else? There's a piece of that listening, so, 'cause I think that's so much a part of this chapter. It's the first step in affirming someone's worth when you meet them, and when you have that initial conversation with them, whether it be on the phone or in person. So our normal mode of listening, if we're not paying attention, right, is distracted, or, in one ear, out the other kind of thing. So why is active listening, if you will, reflecting back to what people have to say, getting more information from them, why is that not our normal modus operandi? How is that,
Takes time.
why, what?
It takes time,
It takes time,
effort.
And effort.
effort,
Usually we're in a hurry, we're ready to go on to the next thing.
so the rush, usually we're in a hurry. Anything else?
Sometimes there's attitudes, oh, they're whining again,
Attitudes?
you know?
So then we're
Trying to,
turned off.
rationalize our own theory for their problem, not hear what their problem actually is.
And wanting to come up with an answer.
Right,
They're
okay.
too quick.
Correct it.
So our mind's already working,
Yeah,
our
or
mind's
I'll
working,
fix,
not
we
listening.
need to fix this.
We got it
Yeah.
figured out before we hear the whole story.
Yep.
Yes.
And frankly, it costs us something. Spending time really listening to stories, really digging deeper into people's lives and hearing their story, what they're saying may not line up with how we normally think. And instead of rushing to judgments and speaking that, it costs us something to put that aside and just listen. It takes some energy. My opinions might not line up with, you might hear some things that really shock you, that you cannot rant that way,
And
you
trying
know?
to put yourself in their shoes sometimes, when they start revealing things
Right.
like that, and you don't have a clue what that feels like.
Right.
to be in
So
that
passive
spot.
listening costs us nothing. It really doesn't. Hardly any time even. Listening for depth, active listening, repeating back to them, listening for empathy, listening for understanding, costs us. It does, and that's part of it. And I think that's part of why, as a society, our normal MO is the passive listening. We're going a million miles an hour. We've got a lot of other irons in the fire. And it costs me time to really focus in on you and listen to your story. And it's not the normal way. It can, I mean, we can change that, and certainly in our organization, that's what we're about, right? That's what Love Inc. is about. Because we have to listen if we're gonna be able to help them recapture their self-worth and view themselves the way God views them. Any other comments?
I think one of the things that I learned through the whole lesson, is that, you know, it was based on God seeing value in someone. And, you know, that's something I think we need to learn, me especially, to remember, first of all, that God has value in each of us. And how can we, you know, we need to try to find out what that value is and you know, ourselves, so we can help. But, you know, I think just remembering that no matter what situation someone's in, they have value in God's eyes, and we need to remember that. Or I need to remember that, so. I think that's what I got, the main thing I got out of the whole lesson, so.
Good, thanks. All right, well, yeah.
But then to be able to share that value with them, that they are valuable also to God. To help them to start seeing their own value so they can start taking steps to change.
So reflecting that back to them.
I heard a sermon about it, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I gotta tell, almost daily, I gotta tell myself, wait, listen, shut up, John, listen.
Yep. Yep. All right, good. Well, I think we'll go ahead and move on to the story of Naaman.
It's good to be home. When I start talking with my
Hard to
hands, I'm gonna
waters.
whack, yeah. So, we're gonna look at the story of Naaman. It's from 2 Kings, the first part, basically verses 1 through 14. And I'm just gonna tell it as a story. And I urge you to go home and read it from the text. It's not that I don't think that Bible text is important, but I think it helps us to hear the story first and then to go actually read the text. I think you get more out of it. So the story is about Naaman. It takes place about 200 years after King David lived. The nation, the Jewish people, are into 2 nations, a northern and a southern at this time. And the story is actually about a non-Jew named Naaman. He is a general in the kingdom of Aram, which we would know as Syria today. And he was a very good general. The king liked him, except there was one problem. He had leprosy. And the kingdoms of Aram and Israel were kind of at odds during the day. And in one of this general's raids, he had taken a young girl from the nation of Israel and brought him back to be his wife's servant. And this gal tells his wife, you know, there's a prophet in Israel that could heal Naaman. And so Naaman gets permission from the king. He gets some men together. He gets some riches together to go and get healed. So first he starts at the king, and the king's like, what are you doing here? I can't heal you. You trying to start a war or something, buddy? And Elisha sends a message, no, don't worry about the king. You come to me, and I'll help you. And so the whole entourage moves down to Elisha's house. And they get up to the house, and the servant opens the door, says, Naaman, go wash in the Jordan 7 times and you'll be healed. Closes the door. And Naaman's like, what was that? Why didn't Elisha come out himself? Why didn't he come out and ask his God some special words and wave his hands over me and heal me here? And that Jordan River, well, that's just a pathetic river. We have better rivers at home. What's the deal? Can't I just go home and wash myself in those rivers? He was just disgusted. And then one of his servants came and said, Sir, if he had asked you to do something hard, wouldn't you have done it? But he just asked you to go wash in the Jordan 7 times. Why don't you just try it? And he was like, well, okay. And so the whole entourage moves down to the Jordan River, And Naaman proceeds to wash once, twice, nothing's happening. Finally, at the 7th time, he comes out of the water and his skin is all healed and it's just like smooth as a baby's skin. And that is a story from the Word of God. So as we think about this story, it's in Scripture, how would the leprosy, how would this disease have changed Naaman's life physically? What changes would have come in his life because of this leprosy?
He probably couldn't do a lot of things he'd been able to do previously, and he was ostracized, that he, people didn't want to be around someone because it was contagious.
Right.
Even
So-
the laws forbade it.
Isn't it
He was
painful?
accepted.
Isn't leprosy painful too?
Well, and you kind of lose
Lose your
limbs
extremities,
and
your-
sight and
Yeah.
just, so he probably wouldn't be able to do his job as well. If you're in the military, you gotta be in pretty good shape. If we think about financially, was he paid the same then because he couldn't, we don't know. I mean, we're just kind of thinking through what it might have been like to be Naaman.
People wouldn't be afraid of him,
Yeah, in, Hebrew, they were totally ostracized. I don't know what, the culture of Aram, but you would think that probably something similar because there was no cure for leprosy then, and you didn't want it, so let's put you outside of town, and the only people you have contact with is other lepers. So emotionally, what would the effect of this disease have been?
Very isolating.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't be a man you were kind of feeling, right? I mean, he was a general, that's a pretty good position.
Probably saw less value in himself.
Yeah, and we think, how would that have affected like his marriage, his family life?
Negatively.
It was probably,
Yeah.
I mean, other than, he must have had some kind of contact with his wife, because his wife said, you gotta go get cured. But it would probably be a lot more limited
Yeah.
than what it had been. So just this one disease kind of would cascade into other problems. So what role did God play in this story? We'll start out with the big guy first.
He healed him.
He healed him, yeah, and even though was this man a Jew?
No.
He was actually an enemy of the
Yeah.
Jews, but God still healed him. What role did Elisha play?
He was God's prophet, he was the channel for him to receive the healing, told
Right.
him what to do, what
Mhm.
God wanted him to do,
And what did Naaman have to do?
obey.
Obey.
Believe.
Yeah, he had a choice. I mean, he could have just been offended and gone back home.
He didn't want to obey, but he did.
Right.
Yeah, and so what role did his friend or servant probably have in this? Was asking some hard questions of your superior, right? So how did the servant's question, how did he question Naaman with the truth? And would it have been easy?
Going down to the river would have been easy. He just pointed out, what if it had been something much harder? Would you have done it in order to do it? Come on, this isn't that hard, basically, you think.
Yeah,
But
what do you-
challenging,
Yeah.
still.
Yeah, challenge, I mean, cause I'm assuming if Naaman didn't like it, he could have had him
Yeah.
punished, done it, and it was a different society. So he must have had a good working relationship with the servant, and the servant must have cared. Cause
Yeah.
the servant didn't care about him,
Yeah.
it's like, all right, let's just go home. But he must have wanted his boss to get healed. It's like, why don't you try it?
Just try
He
it.
kind of reasoned with him, he just reasoned with him,
Yeah,
I mean, And
Uh-huh.
maybe sometimes we have to do that too.
Yes,
You know,
and
just
how
raise
hard,
it, you know.
as we think about it,
Yeah,
sometimes how hard is it to confront others with truth?
yeah.
And how comfortable is it? Not, usually not, right?
No.
Um,
But I think he made Naaman think. You know,
mhm.
well, maybe it took a little while, but, oh, okay, maybe I should, you know.
Right, and so as we look at the story, where did Naaman really have to make a choice? And the consequences of each,
You have
part?
to weigh them, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, pride causes us to do lots of
Right.
things
Mhm.
that maybe aren't always the
Well,
most positive.
Yeah, and choices, well, should I just go back to what I've been doing all along? I know I wasn't happy with that, so, well, heck, I might as well try it, you know?
Well,
Right.
maybe he thought I could go back to the river where I think it's a better river than this one, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
So that probably
And-
went through his head.
Well,
you know.
and considering his, maybe social stature,
Yeah.
that he was a general, and people bowed to him, so that just to have some servant come and say a sentence and then shut the door in his face,
Mm-hmm.
probably was a blow to his ego,
Oh, I'm sure.
that kind of thing. But how often don't we do similar things?
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
That I'm sure Naaman had his whole, this is what's gonna happen, and he's gonna do all this mumbo jumbo, I don't know, what he thought, expected. But obviously, Elisha was not meeting his expectations. But there again, don't we deal with people that might have expectations of us that we can't meet? And how do we walk through that situation?
I think sometimes it's, being like the familiar versus change. You know,
Mhm.
what they're doing
Mhm.
might not be working, but it's comfortable, because they're
Correct.
familiar with it.
Yep.
Versus something different that might work, but it's a change.
Kind of scary.
And
It's the
scary,
unknown.
Scary, yeah.
Yeah, it's totally the unknown.
The unknown.
Unknown.
It's the
Scary,
unknown,
scary.
right.
Yeah, and will you be with me, if I step out of here, will somebody help me, or are they gonna slam me in the ground? Kind of thing. Is it even gonna be worse than it was before? Yeah. So what did Naaman want versus what did he really need? If we think about our story.
Well, he wanted instant healing, right?
Mhm.
But he really needed to know that there's a higher power out there. Maybe he's not as powerful as he thinks he is. I mean, of
Right.
himself. I'm thinking, maybe there's something I need to be aware of.
He
Right?
wanted the comfort zone, you know.
Mhm.
It's hard. I mean, how often do we talk to people who may have an illness and you suggest maybe they try something different and they won't. They won't, and it's a struggle.
Mhm.
You can't make them do it, you can suggest that they do it, but it's just, no one wants to try something new.
Yeah, something they didn't
Once-
expect.
Yeah.
Something that may sound foolish to them, but yet God can work through that. And so we kind of see that God has a part, and Elisha had a part, and Naaman had a part in this whole
There were a lot of people involved,
situation.
just even the little girl to speak
Yeah,
up.
the little girl.
Yeah.
Yep, that how many times does God use the body
Yeah,
to accomplish something? Right?
And then I think when people call into living, don't they think that they're going to get the same kind of thing that they've always had? So they're kind of like taken aback, well, they didn't give me anything.
Yeah.
They're not, we have a person that's in that mode just, and well, they don't help you.
So there-
So
it's
they
not
don't,
what
they
they're
don't
expecting.
want, yeah. So they don't want to call back, or they don't wanna get involved if they don't understand it and they don't know why it's different. So,
Mhm. Yeah, because they've never had to take part or had input. And they were just very passive when they received the help. And it was short-term help. And it's a whole lot harder to develop a relationship, to realize that someone, you might have to be accountable and somebody does care. It's a whole different cup of tea. Yeah, I mean, it's like you're expecting chocolate and you get peanut butter and it's, wait a minute.
Exactly, it's that shock that they have,
Mhm.
because they're not expecting to hear what we have to say.
Right.
They already know what they're going to hear, and let it.
Yeah. So I think we'll move on to the teaching from Lois.
Poverty is directly linked to the number of resources that an individual has lost or is compromised, or that they have. And the greater the number of resources that a person has available, the easier it is to build other resources. So let me give you an example. Some important resources I have listed on the side here: financial, emotional, mental, spiritual, physical, your support systems, all of those things. But let's talk about, and this scenario has happened so often with people that I've assisted. Someone gets sick. A man gets sick, seriously sick. So the first resource he lost was his health. But because he's sick, he can't work. So he loses his job, and when he can't work, what else is impacted? Their finances.
Yeah.
So pretty soon, they can't keep up with their bills, so they often lose their house. Now he's lost his house. His wife and him are falling apart under the stress. So that relationship is starting to fray, and pretty soon he may even lose that relationship. As the relationship frays, emotionally and mentally, he starts to become very depressed, and he struggles with just his outlook on life and who he is. He's just a shell of the person that he was. And when someone has lost that many resources, especially a lot of them due to things that they can't control, one of the last resources to then go is their spirituality. They start to go, God, why did you do this? I've always went to church. I've always loved you. I've always tried to serve you. Why have I lost my health, my job, my home, my wife, my mind? Don't you love me? So I ask you, if somebody loses that many resources, how do we help them when they give them a box of food? Because normally anyone in need, we give them some food, we give them some stuff. But he doesn't need food and stuff near as much as he needs somebody to help him build his resources back up. The wagon principle is all about building up the resources in a person's life. It's acknowledging that just like a wagon has four wheels, and if the wagon's going to roll forward in life, it's going to need all four wheels on the wagon and not broken. Well, I think anybody who's trying to move to a better place in their life has got to have the four wheels of their life looked at. And these four wheels are critical. The spiritual wheel, the belief system. What have they built their life upon? What is their belief system? The physical wheel is the one that we all like to look at. I mean, it's the one they ask for. It's the one they readily bring in front of you. I need food. I need housing. I need my car fixed. I need money. The physical wheel, no one hides. It's not even looked at as a bad thing to bring it out in the open and to ask people for help. And so we're really into fixing that wheel, aren't we? I like that wheel. The relational, the other wheel, the relational others wheel, the people in their life. Who's been their role models and mentors in the past? Who's currently their role models and mentors, their support system? What relationships are they in? Is it negative or positive? Those other people in their life. Who are they trying to please? Important things on that wheel. And the last wheel, the hidden wheel. Our emotional self wheel. If I was to ask any of you in this room, probably when you walked in, if I had said, "How are you tonight?" you would have said, "Fine. I'm good." That's what we tell each other. We all protect our emotional self wheel. We don't go around and tell somebody, "You know what, I'm struggling with depression so bad I just don't know if I can get up in the morning. You know, I have an addiction. I'm addicted to painkillers." We don't tell people about our emotional self wheel. We hide it. We cover it up. We do everything we can to pretend it's not broken, to pretend that it's not got anything wrong with it. And if people ask us, we say, "Oh, it's fine, it's fine. You don't even need to look at that wheel. We're great. I'm good." But if we want to help somebody move to a new place in life, we're going to have to look at all four wheels, and we're going to have to acknowledge that all four have to be working in order to move. So the wagon principle, the third piece of the defining difference, is just acknowledging and looking into those four components. So I want to talk to you a little bit about empowering and not enabling. I'm convinced that often thoughtless giving is motivated by apathy and complacency, laziness. I really think so. We do something, what do? We do charity compassion, right? We do something so we can say we're doing something, but we don't get involved. So we enable rather than empower people. And I think it interferes in whatever God's doing in their life. It keeps people from being part of the solution. They don't have to make a better choice. They can continue to make poor choices and live in destructive lifestyles. And I think most of all, it interferes in whatever God is doing and whatever plans He has for them. So when I think about this is how I see it. I think of when my oldest son Cody was little. I taught them to make their bed when they were really little toddlers, because I just thought they should start when they were young, and even though they didn't make it well at all, that's how they would learn to make it better, was to start when they were little. I didn't care that they couldn't make it well, I just wanted them to learn. But imagine if, when I was trying to teach Cody to make his bed, if every time I said, "Cody, go in and make your bed," the neighbor ran into our house and ran in and made it for him. And this happened morning after morning after morning. Every time I asked Cody to make his bed, the neighbor came in and made it. And I finally stopped the neighbor and I said, "Why are you making Cody's bed? I want to teach him. It's hard for him. He can't do it very well. It just takes me a minute. I can do it really, really quick." And I tell him, "Don't make his bed. He'll never learn to make his bed. It'll never get easier. If you keep doing it, the only way that he's going to learn to make that bed and it's going to get better and it's going to get easier is if he struggles through not doing it well." Well, people, I think God is just looking down at us, and I think He's just yelling at anybody that'll listen, saying, "Don't make the bed. I'm teaching them. Quit making the bed." So what if they can't do it really well? So what if it's hard? They'll never learn if you keep interfering. It's this idea that God's playing in this. When we help people, we must understand that there are three significant roles. There is our role as the one who helps, their role as the one who needs, and most importantly, God's role. And only through prayer and slowing down and asking Him will we understand what part He's playing, what He's doing, and what our parts are, because He actually holds the game book. He's the one who lays the plan out. And I will guarantee you this, God never plays our part and he never plays their part. He's not confused, we are.
So good.
We just need to ask him.
Yep, she is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can tell that she's dealt in this years and years. And I think and I've heard her speak in person, and you can just feel her heart. And I asked God, what do I do? And it's like, yeah, I do the same. It's like, I don't know. And I think, she, through these teachings, is sharing with us what she has heard from God and how do we address this stuff. And so I'm going to read through the case study for the week, and it's on page 86. And here again, all these case stories are not totally about one person. It's kind of a grouping of things, a typical story of what she's dealt with. So as she starts. 86. Randy and Kathy sat quietly in my office, looking anywhere but at each other. I sensed brokenness in Randy and aggression in Kathy. I could tell before a word was spoken that she was only here to make a point. Whatever happened behind closed doors had shut her down emotionally. As I prayed before we began, I asked for strength and wisdom to get to the bottom of what was going on. They answered the questions politely, both speaking when spoken to, but nothing more. And then I asked, why are you here? What do you want from Love Inc.? Kathy responded quickly, wanting to say her piece first, her story tumbling out dramatically. She had wanted this program months ago, hoping it would save the marriage, but Randy wouldn't come. Their marriage had continued to crumble, and she finally kicked him out of the home. She was done. It was over. His drinking was out of control, and she wanted nothing more to do with him. And then, she said with disgust, Randy did the most bizarre thing. She went on to explain that he had started coming to the program by himself. The very program he refused to attend when she still had hope. It had enraged her, as if now it would make any difference. She only agreed to come to the interview because she wanted to make sure her side was heard. They weren't divorced yet, and their money was still tangled together. She didn't want him making decisions about money without her. All this is his fault. He's the one with the problem, and he has destroyed our lives, she said as she delivered her final blow. Then it was Randy's turn. And as I turned to him, the sadness in his eyes were raw and extreme. He agreed. He hadn't wanted to come before. He had a drinking problem, and he had pushed her to the edge. But he was ready to do whatever it would take to save his marriage and to keep his family intact. His voice trembled as his eyes begged me to offer them something to grab hold of. Do you work with couples who are not even living together? He quietly asked. I sat for a moment, contemplating the months that would lie before them. It wouldn't be an easy path, and it would require difficult choices, hard work, and forgiveness between them. I looked at Kathy, whose deep hurt was camouflaged in her aggression and anger. I had once been where she was, and I had given up. I knew Kathy didn't have any idea how difficult divorce would be, but I did. And I believed it was worth fighting to keep their marriage together. My answer was complicated, laying out requirements and restrictions that would challenge them both. But I hoped their story could be different from mine, and I was willing to take a chance. Ultimately, it would be up to them. Would they be willing to take the tough steps required to turn their situation around? So, Lois talked about the domino effects, that something can cause another problem, that causes another problem, that causes another problem. And we've looked at Naaman's story, and we've looked at Lois's case study. And so what did the domino effect look like in both of those things? So if we just think about Randy and Kathy, how did his drinking begin to affect the family? What had happened?
I'm guessing that was the start of the domino effect, was the drinking. 'Cause
Mhm.
most of the time you hear about that can destroy families and relationships. Lose trust, and then it starts moving.
Actually, it goes maybe a step before that. What was wrong with the relationship
To
that
start the
again
drinking,
relays on
it could be.
alcohol?
Well, I mean, and what are the reasons for addictions? I
Yeah.
mean, there's a
Good list.
myriad as you can,
Yeah.
was there a woundedness in him? Was there something between them? I mean, it could be a number of things. But once he started drinking, I mean, if you think about, she talks about the 4 wheels, which are physical, financial,
Finances, spiritual.
emotional, and spiritual. So his drinking would affect them how financially?
Or he'd be spending money on the drinking versus his family coming first.
Right.
Emotionally, all of a sudden, he doesn't feel worthy of his family, so that even pulls him further away from them.
And obviously, what emotion is she, I mean, the relationship between him and her is damaged, right? And so physically, what might be happening, if he's drinking and she's angry
She doesn't want anything to do with him.
and
You know, she
our
doesn't
bills
want to
getting
be with
paid,
him. Yeah.
with this whole mess. And then, of course, spiritually, if we kind of look at last week's, why didn't God fix it? Kind of
Yeah.
question, where's God in this mess? And so you can see the layers in this whole situation. And we talked about what are the other ways that one can be in poverty, right? That it's just not, and middle class American people, we're into stuff. Here, let me give you food, let me give you a blanket, or, I know, I'm thinking probably the first week, Lois had given this, had laid down on, if I was laying on the floor and you wanted to help me, what would you do? Well, you could bring me food, you could bring me a blanket, but what do I really need?
Help you get up.
You need help to get up. And so, for me, that has really changed my because I always think stuff too, oh, you don't have food, we need to get you groceries, but it's like, there's more than that.
I mean, really, that wagon wheel principle, which, I have the first edition of the book, I don't have that in mine. Your newer books have a study guide with the wagon wheel principle in the whole back.
Yep.
So there's a whole section, you could read more of that on your own perhaps. But I look at those 4 components, those 4 wheels, you could experience poverty, that could be relationally poor.
Right.
I could have all the stuff in the world. Now, we typically get calls that the root thing that they're looking for is a physical thing. We will get calls eventually, where there may be more relational poverty than stuff. Whether it be a strained marriage relationship, or, people may be calling for a lot of different help. Could be they're grieving the loss of a loved one, don't know where to turn. Right, that's a different kind, that's emotional poverty, that, they just are not healthy emotionally and looking for help. So any of those wagon wheels that are broken, or any of those 4 areas, we can experience poverty. We tend to think of the felt need.
Right.
That's the first place we look.
It was interesting, Emmanuel School wanted us to give, Love Inc. to give a presentation to 3rd and 4th graders, or they had a special week, and it was like, okay, what do we do with this? But we pulled out the wagon wheel thing, because they all had a red wagon, or they knew what a wagon was, right? And so it's like, asking them how many wheels have to work. All have to work. Okay. And then going through, the physical one's easy, did they groceries, do they have clothes? And then talking about emotionally, if they were sad or, well, if we gave them food, is that gonna help them? And, I mean, they kind of they're looking at you like, no, lady, that's not, and then talk about, relationship, if they needed friends, you know, and those kids all know what a friend is, and they all want a friend, is giving them, you know, like a happy, or taking them to McDonald's gonna make a friend. Well, it might help for a moment, but not just food, they need, and they know what a friend
To want
is.
to be with them.
And because it was a parochial school, I could, of course, talk about the spiritual
Yeah.
thing. That what difference does it make that you know Jesus and they may not? And it was like, oh, we got through that one. But it's like, how do I explain loving to a third grader? Yeah. But that word, I mean, they, you know,
Bet you they
and
got
they
it.
specifically asked, you know, is this gonna help? And they're like, are you crazy? No. It's like, that was the response I wanted from them. But, yeah, it's just a whole different way of looking at poverty. For me, that's not a
And we
lot.
tend to look at that physical stuff.
But
and
kids would
always-
really understand about friendships.
Right.
Oh, brother, they know what
Relationships.
it's like to somebody no one wants to play with them on the playground.
Yeah.
They know what that's about.
And I
Yeah.
think, is there a question on the intake, who would you ask if you needed help? I can't remember
Who
if
are,
that was.
who are the people that support you?
Right, okay. Because sometimes, especially if you have a woman that's escaping a abusive domestic situation and just left town and just planted here, who do you have?
Yeah, I remember when I first started doing the benevolence work that we were doing at CLF, and I was doing, in the early days, it was just the stuff. Like, you know, we'd help them with a felt need, and I began to ask them the more relational questions after a while. I started getting smarter. And said, who do you have in here? Because I knew if I give them whatever X is, as soon as that is gone, then what? So I was trying to build the longer walk with who do you have in your life? Who are the people in your life that can help you really grow in this? Do you have anyone in your life? Sad thing is, sometimes, you know, I
They
was
couldn't think
amazed
of
at
it all. I
or
think they can't think of
the
it.
number
No,
of bridges
yeah.
that they burned.
They don't wanna
Yeah.
give you any names.
Yeah, it can be really incredible.
On TV yesterday, sometime, I don't know, I was just kind of vaguely listening, and they were telling about a teacher who was collecting laundry detergent. Did anyone see that
Is that
segment?
the principal?
Was it the principal?
Black principal in New Jersey.
In New Jersey? Okay, you know the story better than I do then. Well, long story short, he had all of the detergent, and what he found out is these people that didn't have much couldn't get their clothes cleaned. And so he knew that if they could have clean clothes, they would be accepted by more people.
Well, they
So-
weren't coming to school because of
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
There's a ministry in town that just started up a while back.
Yeah, I think
Called
Moravian
Living
Church.
Waters through the Moravian Church. And they found, you know, that study that, you know, there's a lot of kids not going to school because they don't have clean clothes.
And then they get
And so now
teased.
they can go there and they'll provide the laundry facilities and the detergent free of charge, the parents, so that you can get their.
But some of our schools do that, it's just not talked about.
Oh,
The social worker, the counselor will do it on the side.
Yep.
Just so nobody even knows it's occurring, you know, your clothes are here, you can come down and change, you know. They do that, but,
They do.
but they don't want everybody to say,
To
oh,
know.
you know what I mean? So they keep it quiet, I know they do.
Mm-hmm.
But it sounded like in this segment that those children are just so happy to be able, it was a struggle for them to start using that facility, but they knew the importance of it, and they were just happy that it was there, you know, and pretty soon
But
that
he was providing
pride-
relational resources too, because it showed him doing other things along with that. He was at the curb in the morning, in the rain, greeting every single kid that came to school and shaking their hand and going down the hall. He wasn't
see, I
very
didn't get
in
the
his
whole
office all
story.
day. He
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
doing the
He was
relational, the emotional. You could see all these things and what he knew, because he had grown up there. So he understood where these kids were coming
Sure,
from, so.
sure.
Which gets to I love the story that she tells about making beds.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so perfect.
So that enabling thing, which takes a lot of thinking through, creativity, you know, a little bit, because it's so easy just to
Do it.
respond
for 'em.
with stuff. But it makes you think when you think about, again, talking about the three players in all of these. You think about Naaman's story, you think about the case study, you think about anybody that calls or you. There's three parts to this thing, right? There's God, there's the recipient, there's the giver, right? And, you know, we have to think through, how do we do things so we're not enabling them, or at least minimizing that as much as possible, so that they can do it themselves. Because it goes back to what we talked about last, or what we read about last week, the whole self-worth piece. If we just do it for them, nothing changes. in
You're the
here,
boss, they're the dummy.
right? But as soon as they begin to do, and they see success
Yeah.
in that stuff, then they go, oh, I can do it. You know, I really can. Okay. And a lot of this stuff is so generational. That's where you start getting the true aha moments for people. They just they haven't thought about it any other way.
So
So,
a counselor gave me a one-line one time that I have used that works great. You'll feel better if you do it yourself. You'll feel better about this if you can do it yourself, no matter how big that task is, and they can't argue with that.
right. And you think about God's role in this thing, because I was thinking as we were talking about Naaman, thinking about this story, and thinking about the story before, that Lori, who at the end of,
Yep,
when
so mad at
Lois,
God.
mad at God. Well, do you think God cares about that Lori's mad at him? Do you think God loves people before they love him?
Oh,
Right?
right.
And so we gotta get over some of that stuff. You know, I was just out in LA and saw some homeless stuff that I hadn't been around in quite a while. Frankly, it's shocking, you know? And, you know, immediately, you begin to front load like judgments, like, what are they doing? That, you know, they need to be, you know, da-da-da-da-da.
You don't know their story.
Yeah.
You don't know their story, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, and the whole, you know, God loves them. God has a plan for them.
They have
God
value.
knows why they're there. They have value in God's eyes. You know, that whole thing, God loves people before they even recognize who he is. And Naaman's kind of an example of that. God was gonna heal him and, you know, so, and I think that's another thing we have to get over with obviously, we know that it's only Christ that can change people from the inside out. We're tools, right, in God's hands. But it's the Holy Spirit, it's God that does the work. And God doesn't care, we have far more bias and all that stuff that God has none of that. And we need to get beyond some of that stuff. So we're kind of running into it.
Yep, I think we'll close for now, because we are at the 1 o'clock hour, so we wanna value your time too. But our next session will be April 10th, and the pages, if you have this book, are 86 to 107 for next week, and we'll do probably the same type of format. It seems to work good, so. So I can end this in prayer here. Lord, we just thank you for this time together. We just thank you that you love each of us. And we just ask that you would give us your eyes for the people that we deal with every day. That you would remove our prejudice, our preconceived ideas, Lord. That we would be able to see them as you see them and love them as you love them. And we just ask this in Jesus' name.